Hi, I'm Eric from Lonesome Reader, and today I want to record what I think will be the first part of my April book haul videos, because April is a big month in publishing. Like, a lot of books are coming out, a lot of really interesting sounding books are coming out. So I want to go through some of the books which publishers have kindly sent to me and which I think sound really intriguing. So I'm going to start out by talking about these 10 lovely books that have been sent to me and why I'm interested in reading them. The first is a novel called How to Be Human by Paula Kokoza. This is published by Hutchinson, and I wanted to start with it because it has a beautiful, lovely cover, and I love a beautiful cover. It has this great design of birds flying upwards, but also they make a kind of fox face in a repeated pattern. So I think that's quite lovely. And it's the story of a woman named Mary who comes home from work one day to encounter a fox, and she has that kind of moment of them staring at each other. I don't know if you've ever encountered a fox before. You have these moments if you encounter a fox where you'll just stop and be staring at each other. So she gradually develops a relationship with this fox over time and seems to be communicating with him, and it brings out unexpected things about her personality, which is a story that sounds somewhat similar to Elizabeth Mackenzie's novel called The Portable Veblen. I don't know if any of you read that before, where a woman has these imagined relationships with squirrels. So it sounds like a really intriguing, fun story, and I love foxes, so that sort of sold me instantly. Next is another book with a lovely cover as well, called Swimmer Among the Stars by Kanish Thoreau, and this is published by Picador. And I don't know if you can see, it has a lovely like silver design with the start of an elephant here, which goes on to the back. It's always really difficult to summarize short stories, but there's this description on the back which says, "An interview with the last speaker of a language, a chronicle of the final 7 days of a town that is about to be razed to the ground by an invading army, the lonely voyage of an elephant from Kurla to a princess's palace in Morocco, a fabled cook who flavors his food with precious stones, a coterie of international diplomats trapped in near-Earth orbit, a stunning collection of short stories from a remarkable new writer." And so I like the sound of the kind of like fable-like feel of the stories. And also the writer Helen Oyemi wrote a blurb for it. She's such a wonderful writer, so I sort of trust her opinion. Her quote is, "It's the details within the details that get me. There's just this beautiful telescoping the writing does between a kind of ruthless precision and something just as close up but more tender, like counting fingers and toes." So I'm always on the hunt out for good new short stories, so I really want to read this like beautiful looking collection. Next is a novel called The Evening Road by Laird Hunt, and this is published by Shadow and Windus. And this is a novel set in the American South during the 1920s, and it's about the story of a lynching and two women who meet on this road where the lynching is taking place, and about the story of their relationship, the story about them living in this environment of fear and hatred. So I think apparently it gives like a Flannery O'Connor type feel, and I think it sounds really intriguing. The Valentine House by Emma Henderson, and this is published by Scepter. I think this has a particularly beautiful cover too, which sort of goes with the plot of the novel, which is set in the French Alps, starting in the early 1900s, when a man called Sir Anthony Valentine goes to the French Alps with his family and meets a local girl there. And it's about the interaction between them, and then how many years later this girl who's grown up to a woman discovers a secret in the chalet that this family inhabited. And it sounds quite intriguing because apparently Sir Arthur Valentine was the judge that presided over Oscar Wilde's trial. So it sounds like one of those really intriguing novels and stories that you just get drawn into, particularly like on a day when the weather is really bad outside. The Impossible Fortress by Jason Rekulak, and this is published by Faber and Faber. And I think this is going to be one of those books that connects with me personally because it's set around the time period that I grew up in. It's the mid to late 80s and the Reagan era, and it's about geeky teenager playing video games, so I can really relate to all that. And it's also about Vanna White, apparently, who was a model on Wheel of Fortune and was this sort of like big figure in the popular imagination when I was growing up. There's a quote on the back from David Ebershoff, who's an author I really like, and he says, "A love letter to the 1980s, adolescence, technology, nerddom, and Vanna White. The Impossible Fortress will make you laugh and remind you of how much is possible when you're 14." So it sounds like a really geeky type fun novel. The Proof by Caesar Area, and this is published by And Other Stories. So Caesar Area is one of those writers that is just really weird, and I'm just really intrigued by him. So this novel, this very short novel, apparently is about a young woman, a teenage girl, who encounters two other teenagers and how she's inducted into their circle, and they require a sort of proof for her to be allowed inside their friendship group. I'm sure it's much more surreal and not as straightforward as that, but I'm, intrigued by his take on that sort of adolescent period where we desperately want to be a part of like a friendship group to build up our own sense of self-esteem. So I think he's just a really intriguing, bizarre writer, which is always fun to read. The Barrow Fields by Philip Lewis, and this is published by Scepter. This is a debut novel, and it's one that I don't really know the plot of, and I think it's one of those books that I don't really want to know the plot. I'll just want to sort of plunge in, because there's blurbs on it from two authors that I really like. One positive blurb from Jenny Fagan, and then another blurb from the author Matthew Thomas, who wrote this wonderful novel called We Are Not Ourselves. And he writes, "The psychological landscape is craggy in this vivid update of Southern Gothic, viscerally urgent and beautifully languorous. Lewis goes down to the depths and back up in this powerfully hopeful book, and the reader is helpless in his hands." You know, with some books, I just want to be left intrigued and not know too much about it, and just go into the story and see what I find. So this is a novel that I'm hoping to just plunge into. Tell Me How This Ends Well by David Samuel Levinson, and this is published by Corsair. So this is a novel set in a future, like near future time in Los Angeles, and it involves a Jewish family, and apparently there's, at this future set time, there's a lot of anti-Semitism going on. And it's the story of three children, I think, who live under a tyrannical father, and they plot to possibly kill him. So I think that sounds like a really intriguing story, and I'm always really interested of how authors deal with these times in the near future when the details of society aren't completely different, but they're slightly different. So I'm interested to see how the author handles that. The next books I'm going to talk about are two nonfiction books, and the first is a memoir called Gone by Min Kim. This is published by Viking. I heard this author speaking about her memoir at a preview event, and she also gave a performance, because this is a woman who is a sort of child prodigy. She's a violinist. She's gone on to be a world-famous classical musician. And at this preview event, she gave a performance with her violin, which was so beautiful and moving. Like, I don't listen to a lot of classical music generally, but this just like really struck me and drew me in, and it was really emotional and powerful. But it's the story about how one day she loses her violin, and for a musician that's quite important, because there's a very strong attachment with the artist and their instrument. So it's about that loss and all the emotional consequences of that. So I'm very intrigued to follow her story. And finally is a biography called The Surreal Life of Leonora Carrington by Joanna Moorhead, and this is published by Virago. So I think this is Leonora Carrington is going through a bit of like a revival at the moment. She is a really like intriguing figure and artist who's been sort of like lost in the cracks of history, I think, and now she's coming back into public attention. She was born into an English family and grew up to be a debutante, but then realized that she wanted to be an artist. This was in the early 1900s, and she got involved with all the artistic movements of the time alongside Picasso and Moreau and that whole like Peggy Guggenheim circle of people. And so it's about her artistic successes and her artistic failures, and how Joanna Moorhead traveled down to Mexico, where late in her life Leonora Carrington was living, and about the exchanges that they had and the friendship that developed between them. And I think that just sounds like a really lovely story and a really intriguing figure that I want to know more about. And because Leonora Carrington was a painter, there's some reproductions of her artwork in this book, her very like surreal, strange artwork of these sort of figures. And then also on the book itself is really beautiful, because on the inside cover is this landscape with this sort of Gothic type building and these weird figures sweeping through the landscape. So I think the story of her life sounds really intriguing. That's a lot of books to be getting along with in April so far. So let me know in the comments below which books sound intriguing to you and which ones you want to read as well, and which ones I should start with, because I always get so like pulled back and forth because I think all of them sound good. So I'm not really sure where to start. That's all for now, but thanks for watching and happy reading, everyone.